chair because it's your advisor time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How y'all doing? Good. Got you some good breakfast?
Surely did.
Y'all had sugar and grits?
The grits were trifling.
Oh, okay. Well, we got the video rolling, so.
And like the cheesy ones.
No, the cheesy ones were fire. I don't know what she's.
Okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and we can have everyone introduce yourself. We'll go around the room. Start?
My name is Tristan.
Whatever you feel like we should know.
I'm a third year. I'm going to be a third year student next year. I'm youth step coordinator for Go Saints, and my major is bio, and I'm pre-vet.
I'm Michaela. I'll be a second year next year. I'm an exercise science major, and I'm on the exam board for ABC for school team.
I'm Trinity. I'll be a second year majoring in secondary education, English, and I'm the secretary for ABC and social media marketing chair for Gospel Choir.
I'm Kate Woolsby. I'm a third year psychology sociology double major with a minor in social justice. I'm the president of ABC and an RA.
I am Hope Y. I will be a third year psychology major and a minor in communications. I am here as the president of HAPA and the social media co-chair for ABC.
I'm Trent. I'm going to be a senior next year, and I'm the president of Connect and an RA.
I'm Megan. I'm going to be a second year, and I'm the homecoming and gnome hunt chair for Connect.
I'm going to be a fifth year majoring in OT, and I'm the treasurer for Able.
I'm MJ, she, her pronouns. I'm a fourth year, I'm going to be a fourth year criminal justice pre-law major, and I'm president of Empower.
I'm Delaney. I'll be a second year business administration major, and I'm here as permanent chair of our HA.
I'm Brianna. I'm going to be a second year English and communications double major, and I am here as CAF Life Performance chair.
What's that?
I'm sorry. CAF Life Performance chair.
Oh, okay.
I'm Spencer. I'm gonna be a third year psychology sociology double major, and I'm here with the intro.
I'm Sadie. I'm a third year business administration major, and I'm an RA. I'm Michaela, and I am going to be a fourth year PT major, and I'm here to transition people to vice president and president position in the GC.
Okay, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Most of you should know me. If you don't, I'm Miss Tiffany. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the program coordinators in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and I advise 5 of the cultural organizations. I am HAPA, ABC, LSA, and MUGSA, and I oversee LEAD, which is the Leader for Equity, Advancement, and Diversity Council.
Hi everyone, I'm Zoe. I'm a fourth year graphic design major. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm president of MUGSA and an RA.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Ashley Storman. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a program coordinator in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and I oversee our Multicultural Scholars Program. So good morning, and thank you all for joining us. And so we're going to keep going in our presentation. And so first we want to start off with our purpose. And the purpose today is to make sure that you all have an understanding of diversity and inclusion, but also how do you use these concepts when you're starting your programming, whether it's within your organization, whether you're RA and it's for your floor, but how do you make sure that you have programming that is diverse and inclusive? And it's our hope that we know most of you work within the Center for Student Engagement, whether you come in and you do your programming there or you work closely with us. We hope that you all have an understanding of what diversity means, right?
Yes, this is call and response.
Yeah. Right. Yes. So who can tell me what diversity means? Let's start there. What's your ideal thought, concept on diversity? We got an hour and 15 minutes. So
I'll call it Trent.
So diversity to me is like those unique characteristics that separate you from the rest of society and make you as an individual, but also tie you back to humanity as a whole.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay, come on.
I think diversity is that, and then having different people come together and be productive.
Okay. All right, and then so we understand what diversity is. So what we want to make sure that we reiterate today is what is inclusion. And inclusion is basically when underrepresented, marginalized populations feel like they have a sense of belonging. They feel empowered to talk about, to celebrate, to recognize their cultural background. that they feel like they are part of the community. And so when you think about our office and what we do when we talk about inclusive in you, when we talk about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, our personal mission here on campus is to make sure, regardless of your social identity, when you step foot on this campus, that you feel a sense of belonging, that you feel like you can show up in any space and feel welcome and feel like that you are part of the Maryville community. So when you think about inclusion, think about this graphic that we have here. We're definitely not separated. We don't want to get people here. This is just, so when we think about separation, this is basically diversity. We're diverse. Y'all have y'all space, we have our space, but we don't come together, all right? And then we get into integration, where we're all in the same space, but we still gonna be in this room and be in this little corner over here, and then you all, the mass majority, you have the whole room, right? But inclusion is really when we have a space when you can show up and you go into different organizations. If you're a part of RHA, if you're at the M store, if you're working at the CSE, and you come into the space and you see people from different social identities, conversating, working, learning, having conversations, and willing to learn about each other.
I was going to add, from a programmatic perspective, we see this show up at your events, right? Let's see, this is honest talk. You know how Miss Tiffany is, we're going to keep it funky. So we see people come to your event, they'll stay in their little corner, grab their food, and just be amongst themselves. And that's not the goal of diversity and inclusion programming. It is everyone's sort of responsibility. Every organization across, you have 130 organizations, all 130 of them should be doing something around diversity and inclusion. Because it cannot be solely on the cultural and social awareness student groups, right? So we want to get to your events to be looking like this. And so, and we're gonna walk through a couple of activity today to say, how are we getting our events and our programming and people who are coming to our events to be more inclusive? Because we don't need you to be integrated. Oh, we got a different group of students here, but no one is stepping out of their comfort zone to welcome them, to make them feel a sense of belonging. There's a difference of and I know some of those frustrations everyone has when it comes to people coming to your event, only grabbing food and leaving, but you really wanted that person to connect. You really wanted that person to say, you know what, I want to be involved because you went above and beyond to include me in the space, and you went above and beyond to make me feel like I belong here. Okay?
So building off of creating inclusive spaces, we want to talk about inclusive language, especially in terms of gender. So we have a lot of vocabulary just in our day-to-day lives. You know, we say mankind, we say manpower, and we don't really think about how gendered it is. So we want to think about alternatives for men where the term is generic, maybe ambiguous, but it could refer to like human beings as a whole instead, not just like a masculine set of people. And we want to talk about this because in practice it really works to exclude women. It doesn't work in favor of non-binary people. So basically, if you see vocabulary like mankind, you could try something like people or humanity. If you see something like manpower, it could be workforce. Manning the office could be manning the stall. Staffing the office, staffing the stall. You know, sportsmanlike could be like fair, sporting. And things like girlfriend, boyfriend could be partner, which is also just nice in the sense that you don't want to assume someone's identity. You know, their partner could be someone of any gender. Which leads us into gender pronouns. So you probably noticed when we had everyone introduce themselves, we were just like, hey, introduce yourselves as you see fit. Because we were just kind of curious about who has kind of like built the habit of using their pronouns, and then we want to explain why it's important. So maybe if it's not already routinely in your introduction, you can consider putting it in your introduction. So pronouns are important because when you use someone's correct pronouns, you are validating their gender identity. You are letting them know, hey, like, I hear you. If you walk into a space and you use someone's not correct pronouns, if you do it intentionally, that's like a sign of disrespect, because that's being like, hey, I know what your gender identity is, but I'm not going to use your correct pronouns. So that's just really disrespectful, and it's not validating. We understand that sometimes maybe you just don't know someone's pronouns, you know, and when that happens, it's okay to be like, hey, what pronouns do you use? So just having that discussion and normalizing using pronouns is really important. Up here, we have a little chart talking about some pronouns.
You know, so we have she, her, hers, and he, him, his, which are really what we're taught growing up, but we really want to broaden that conversation to include they, them, theirs, or sie, their, zers, which are gender neutral and just gender non-specific pronouns. So yeah, maybe it's like a language adjustment, but it's really more inclusive, and it just helps people feel respected, it helps people feel validated. So just consider introducing yourself with your pronouns, because it normalizes the habit, you know, and it makes other people just feel good. And then moving on from pronouns, we also want to talk about preferred name. I've also heard just correct name, you know. Basically, someone's name may not always like align with maybe what's on their Maryville email or on their Canvas. So it's just really good to have a conversation of realizing, hey, I can ask what your name is and use that name, because again, it's a sign of respect, it's a sign of validation, and it's just really important. Does anyone have any questions just stemming off of gender pronouns and names while we're here?
I'm not sure what I don't know what the last one.
Yeah, so this is just another example of like a gender non-specific pronoun. So you would use it like she, her, hers, or he, him, his, but it just doesn't have that same like gender specificity. Does that kind of help? Okay.
And it's also
I've just never heard of it before.
yes, and the thing is, it's new because it's like, as Zoe mentioned, we are taught, oh, he, him, his, or as our own, but we're not thinking about what someone else prefers, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone else doesn't use she, her, hers, or he, him, his, they might want to use ze, her, hers. That's what they prefer. So if they use that, that's where the respect comes into play, that you use that in return for them, okay? And it is a language, you're reconstructing your thought process and unlearning things to be even more inclusive, okay? So like, I have gotten so used to saying my pronouns that it's a part of my name, right? Because I don't know who I might interact with, that I want to make sure that I'm setting the tone to create an even more inclusive space. And then when you start hearing someone say, oh, I use them, they, theirs. And you're like, okay, cool. Now I know I can't just assume that if Trent uses them, they, theirs, I can't walk up to him and say, hey, he uses he, him. No, he's already told me that he uses them, they, theirs. So I need to respect the fact that I can't push that on. But it's okay if you make it ouch. Yeah. It's okay to make a mistake, but it's also owning that mistake in the moment. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm still learning. But there's a difference when you keep interacting with the same group of people that you have not learned their pronoun and their preferred name. So for example, when I first started here at Maryville, I despise people calling me Tiff. It is like the one thing that is not my name, but it's the only reason why is in my previous institution, people started calling me Tiff as if I gave them permission to do that. And so everything you saw, they put on there, oh, that's Tiff Reed, that's Tiff Reed, that's Tiff Reed. And I realized like, I do not like that name. I like my whole name, which is Tiffany. And that's why, or I either call me Miss Tiffany. But the reason why is because that's my identity. No one in my family calls me Tiff. So why would I let someone who's a complete stranger abbreviate my name as if we have that relationship? Okay? So that's just another way of being inclusive. Like I remember, everyone knows Popeye, but if you're not her friend, you cannot call her Po. Like it's kind of like, you're not my friend.
I'm very clear about that. You call me by my government name.
Call me by my name. But it comes with a level of respect and just letting people know when you're having events and you're having meetings, start getting your general board and your exec board in the habit of saying pronouns. And you're setting the tone. You're in this space, a lot of people aren't. So when you have your first meeting or first event, do that. Because then it's like, whoa, I didn't know this. And the same question Michaela asks, someone will come up to you and ask. So just remember the wisdom and knowledge you're getting today.
Yeah, I think, getting your exec boards into the habit. I think other places I see it come into play. Email signatures are really important. You know, and I do see a common question coming up. Well, if I feel like my gender is obvious, why do I have to say my pronouns? And the purpose of that is when you go out and you say your pronouns, you're creating a dialogue where you're saying, hey, like, I'm an ally and I will respect your pronouns. And that's really important to maybe someone who's nervous to share their pronouns. So even if you feel like it's obvious, it's still a really good practice because it's just a social gesture to reach out to other people and be like, hey, like, I'm an ally, like, I'll respect pronouns.
Any questions? Thoughts?
Oh, this is me? Okay, yes. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about inclusive conversations, okay? So some of these comments up here is some stuff that we hear people say, maybe at an event, maybe at the M-store, you name it, in any space. So we want to be conscious of how do we hold people accountable when we think that this is just like a funny term or just a day-to-day thing of trying to be hip. So I put these up here because I've heard these things said, these things across campus, right? And so what do you say, what are your first thoughts when you see these statements? What are your first thoughts?
First one, I think was me. Just based on the second one, Black Lives people. I don't know which one it was. The fourth one, I don't know. And then I don't know what. I don't know last. I don't know.
Third, right? So, for example, you hear students who just took a hard test. And they're like, oh my gosh, that test raped me. But why would you use that word? Like if you don't know what that word means, if you don't know the issues behind using the word rape, right? But people say it because they think it's cool, but no one is, how do you have an uncomfortable conversation with someone's like, hey, can you just say that the exam was really hard? Right? Right? Or could you say, oh, that was so stupid. Instead, you said the R word, right? And you're not knowing who's around you. So I just want you to think about the conversations you have with your friends in spaces that may not be in the CSC or if you're going to grab lunch. I just wanted to put this out there that be mindful that you are all in a fishbowl and that you can be unconsciously adding to non-inclusive language just by having, like, hanging out with your friends, okay? And the only reason why I'm putting this out there is because you can't be mad when someone else says it, because you said it, and you said it in a plain way. You said it in a way where, oh, it's not a problem. But all of these words, these statements, all of you had some form of like, oh, why would they say that? That's stupid. Why would they do that? But it happens. And you all are leaders of setting the tone when you're at an event, doing a program, or having a general body meeting. But if you hear terms like this, just ask the question, why did you use that word? And then probably like, oh, like there's other words to use, and this is an inclusive space that we want to continue to keep having, right? So I only want to put these statements up there is because I want, I heard y'all hanging out the other day, and just be conscious of when you're in your not leadership mode, someone is still seeing you as a student leader. Someone is still seeing you as president of Connect. Someone is still seeing you as the RA, and you said, oh my gosh, that's so ghetto, but if you knew I had to go through poverty, or, oh my gosh, that's so gay, that you're affecting someone that is a part of the LGBT community. And so just be mindful and be conscious of that, because that goes against inclusive programming, inclusive language, and just creating an inclusive venue.
And just to add to that, I think sometimes we have to consider these statements that there are others, because I think we all can have a trigger statement or word that would all make us cringe. And so think about how that would make other people cringe if you use these statements within your conversations. And then my second thought or challenge to you would be, don't just use it in these spaces when you're on campus, start to use them when you go home. Like I've even, plenty of times I corrected my mom, I'm like, what? Did you just hear what you said? And I'm like, no, the term you wanna use, Mom, is Asian American or Asian. And she's like, oh, well, I thought they were Oriental. Oriental, what is that? And those people around you will try to start to use the language, but that's a way for you to practice it. Because the great thing about you having this knowledge and this experience is that when you go into the work field, you're gonna be that person who's that inclusive or that diverse leader to make a space for everybody. And most of us have probably been in a space where we have maybe been the oppressed group or we know someone that has been. So think about how they feel and just kind of take this beyond Maryville with you as well, is what I would challenge you. Okay? Okay, so next what we want to talk about is, since you're in this space, we want to talk about some expectations that we expect you to have when it comes to diversity and inclusion programming. And so some things that we encourage you to do is to attend some of our annual programming. We have our diversity dialogues. We have different programming that HAPA does, that the Association of Black Collegians does, that MUGSA does. And so we just invite you to come out to their signature annual programming once a year. For RAs, this would be a great activity for your floor. For your organizations, this would be a great way for you to support your sister or brother organizations. And we also ask that you start to conduct your own programming around diversity and inclusion. It can be passive or it can be active. It can be an opportunity for you to collaborate with another organization that you may not have done so well with or have not partnered with in the future. And I believe MUGSA this year got an award for collaboration because they literally partner with every social and cultural organization on campus. And so we want to start to do that with each other because not only were they focusing on one identity, but they focused on multiple identities throughout the year where regardless of how you identified, you could show up to one of their events and learn more about yourself or learn more about your peers. And so these are just some expectations. Try to come out to an annual event, do some active or passive programming, and make sure that you try to collaborate with at least one organization this year that may be different from you so you can learn from each other. So next we're gonna do an activity. We think that hope we have shared enough knowledge with you so you understand what inclusive means. The activity that we're going to do is called Brick by Brick. Here's your brick wall. And so, before we start, Zoe's gonna go over the ground rules.
Okay, so we just want to set ground rules so everyone's in a comfortable state, so everyone's in a safe space. So basically, this is like a judgment-free zone. We want to be empathetic to our peers. If you need a moment, maybe like a certain topic or some of the content is kind of sensitive for you, like that is a-okay. Like you can step out, you can let us know, it's whatever you need. We want to like maintain communication, just so like we're checking in on each other, making sure everything's going okay. Because we're going to be embracing some really difficult conversations, and we just want everyone to be able to have them as comfortably as possible. And we just want everyone to really think about, like, kind of like our roles, like as being Maryville students, as being Saints Nation, as being student leaders, and kind of like keeping this in mind as we like have the conversation. We want to be present, invested, available, and we want to be validating everyone's emotions. People might have a lot of feelings about this, and that's okay, and we don't want anyone to feel like what they're feeling is not okay. And we just really want to like reflect and process. Speaking in I terms is important, so instead of going to someone being like, oh, you are wrong, well that invalidates them, that invalidates their feelings. Instead you can approach it like, hey, you did this, and I feel this way about it. So that's just a good way to phrase it so that we're all keeping each other in mind. Then we're also maintaining confidentiality. So if someone says something like, hey, maybe this doesn't go outside the room, we just want to make sure we're respecting that. Do you have anything to add?
We're gonna let that brick fall. All right, so what I need you to do is kind of reflect on an experience that you have had or that you've seen that would prevent me, you, us from building an inclusive campus or from stopping and developing inclusive programming. So take a minute, think about something, and then what I want you to do is come and write that barrier on this wall. Does that make sense?
I'll give you an example. My example is, I would say, People on my exec board are closed-minded, which is why we don't have inclusive programming or don't want to collaborate. Okay?
And this can be within your organization, something you personally seen, something you've seen on the floors, maybe something that you experience in the community, not within Maryville, within your family, but think about things that stop us from having an inclusive campus. And so I need each person to think about that and come up and write on one of these bricks.
We have more bricks too.
Yes, if you want to write more, definitely.
Get up and get the moving.
City would like to know it. I'm a warrior. City will basketball game. Like, oh my goodness. This is not a bad cry.
All right, thank you all for participating. I appreciate it.
Read them all?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Come on, y'all start reading.
Okay. Don't keep saying it. It's okay. Let's just take them.
No, don't take them.
Okay, so we have no Hispanic or Latinx administration professors to connect with. Okay. Closed-minded. Ignorance. My exec board is not diversified. Culturally uneducated professors. People who would benefit from the programming not going. Is this scared to step step out of the comfort zone, lack of accountability, preconceived notions and stereotypes, not being accepting of others, of their differences, lack of awareness, lack of effort, and personal bias, no communication. This says, others getting defensive when bringing, hold on. Come on, Devane.
It was, I probably just said, could have said defensiveness.
Defensiveness.
Not what could be like, a good.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the other one is people are uneducated and have caused them to not to go.
It's the cause of not went to co-program.
Not to want to co-program. Okay.
Okay. And so when we think about this wall, right, if we were to just accept all of these barriers, this would be a very hard challenge for us, especially as this is our job, but also for you all to even try to have an inclusive campus. And so my next challenge for you all are to get with the partner next to you, okay? So get with the person next to you, and what I want you to do is to come up and grab a brick. And you are gonna come up with a programming idea.
Based on
Yep, based off of the brick that you pick. It doesn't have to be like scaled out, A to Z, what you're gonna do, but talk through with your partner for about 10 minutes on what type of programming idea that you can come up that will help bring knowledge and awareness and kind of stop this barrier that we may see on this campus. So it can be programming, it can be training, it can be education, it can be anything. It can be anything. So, and then as you do that, you want to make sure that you answer these questions when we come around on the PowerPoint. So go ahead and go. And this one has a couple of in as well.
So through this program, I have option with the student as a professional, I can maybe work on career, incorporation of cultural beliefs, and I can kind of correct it and say, hey, that wasn't cool. So I'm looking at it as a programmer, it just seems like if we hear something or if we're not inclusive, using the non-inclusive stereotypes, we can kind of address that and say, hey, we're just all here trying to make time. There's no need for just like encouraging, hey, I'd love for you to come to the weekend and so this we need to discuss and collaborate with our exec board, and then so that way we're all on the same page, that way we all hold each other accountable, and that way we can all hold the rest of our organization accountable, and we can all get on the same team. It'll be easier to kind of work together. And with this, like, what I want to do is I want to have, like, at our exec board meetings, I want to, talk about programs. I'm like ABC to talk about what they do. I want to talk about, let's say, like, bring in special awards, and then just always talk about what they are, what makes them unique, and just make it that helps us educate ourselves, so we can become more accountable and know what to do. So, I gotta figure out, like, if they come in like the first 10 minutes and just kind of give like, hey, this is what it is. Here's our events we got coming up. It's like kind of what we've been talking about.
I know you. I need you to stay over there and talk to your own.
Yeah.
Is it segregation or are we in a
Sad trial. Sad trial.
I'm so sorry that he's not paying you attention or giving you the time that you're right. You deserve more.
Oh my goodness.
You deserve more.
That's basic. Respect is basic. Now we need to get back to our event, so
Okay.
I'm gonna leave this conversation.
Okay.
It's not as like, it's like
You're supposed to have this training for like how to like navigate situations with patients who are transgender, patients who are like, like just and I remember it's like something like we like talk about it about their issues or like not identified or the way that they're traditionally thinking they should be.
I feel like that make it more whereas I just think everybody should have some kind of another minute or two.
Oh my god, that like hurts my heart. Like that. Wow. Okay.
Your district?
District, not dialogue.
There's like 4 of us that actually show up.
Not just like definitely for majors, like for like majors.
I have Jeremy.
He talked about interesting day.
Are we okay to get started, or do we need another minute or so? Good? Okay. So who wants to start? Make sure you kind of go through this scenario of questions.
So our brick was scared to step out of comfort zone, because I feel like I see that a lot, like with this and different programs and stuff. And like you said, like even if there is a diverse group of people that goes to a program, everybody's kind of click up, which I fall guilty to that all the time. So nobody else. So in order, so the program would be like individuals would come and we would kind of like make everyone sit with somebody that they never met or they don't know, or somebody that's from a different culture or ethnic group than them. And then we would do like activities throughout the program that would like make you learn more about that person or their background. And then someone we would collab with would be like just the cultural groups on campus, so like ABC also those groups that may not be as cultured, and so that we can have like a big enough group of people to come to the event or whatever. And we would just have them, like I said, mix and mingle with each other, and then other things that could like make it better. I said like food or prizes. So like at the end, whoever like knows more about their partner or more about their group, like they would get a prize or whatever. So I guess that would just make more people, encourage more people to come to the program.
Okay, and what was your break again?
It's scary to step out of your comfort zone.
Scary, okay. I like that as a great activity. And I think that would be a good one to kind of kick off the beginning of the year, you know, to get people to know other people with not within that are outside of their social identity. So great job, brainstorming. That's a quick one. All right, who wants to go next?
So our brick, we had lack of accountability, and so for assisting this through programming, so for us, we kind of agreed that in order to be able to hold someone accountable, you have to be educated yourself on that topic. So with that, we would like to invite like Mugza and the cultural orgs to come to our executive board meetings and kind of just showcase like what they do and who they're about. Because a lot of times they don't, like they have their events and they don't reach our population because we are PWI, and we feel like there is that scared to step out of your comfort zone, and recognizing that with our exec board so that we can branch down to our general board and branch down to all people that attend our events. That's where we kind of want to take the first step in educating ourselves and incorporating our other brothers and sister organizations with us to help educate us. Sibling
organization.
All right, sibling organizations to help educate us. And then discuss or collaborate with anybody else. We have to collaborate with our sibling organizations, and also we'd have to collaborate as an executive board together, because holding ourselves accountable in order to hold our general board members accountable, that's like the biggest challenge that we're gonna have to face with this. I think we're good.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, and then we'll go. Sorry, no problem. Sorry.
So our book was ignorance, and we basically went with the ignorance toward disabilities. And a few things that we said we could do is you could partner with Best Buddies and able to try to educate a lot of people on that and try to create a program to promote that. And then we said there needs to be constant education, because it's like with like regular school, you're not just gonna learn it one time at one conference or one just session of looking at it. And a big thing is educating incoming students, because I feel like they're coming in with preconceived notions, so that already proves a little bit of ignorance in them.
Yes, we were also thinking of like having a dialogue discussion and like a panel. And the panel could consist of people who actually do have disabilities, and they can just speak on their experience and their day-to-day experience, and then how it is to live with a disability. Just the knowledge that they're disabilities. Well, that's just one example.
And then lastly, also, and we think that we should educate people on mental disabilities as well, because a lot of people see someone's physical form and say, oh, they look fine, they don't have any disabilities, and then they might say something that is not okay for them mentally. And so that's why people need to be educated on that too.
Okay, great job. Thank you.
So we had people who benefit from programming are going, and we talked about reaching out to the majors, and we were talking about how some majors like education and nursing have like training like built into their programs, but the training isn't really effective because like it just feels like you're just checking off a box, and then like you don't really talk about it anymore, and like no one's actually like people who like need to learn aren't learning anything. So we talked about like maybe having like partnership with the Office of D&I with those majors, and bringing in like guest speakers and members of like the clubs under the Office of D&I, and just to like make that like more of a like continued conversation, and like with the revised diversity dialogue plan, like bringing those like to the majors and having like major specific diversity dialogues.
I like it. Very good.
So our work was having culturally educated
So the program that we wanted to host was a panel of students that would be able to talk to faculty and staff on campus, just kind of discussing like our different cultures. So the people that we said that we would have was people from cultural organizations, or people that represent different backgrounds, beliefs, things like that. And also we said like just having like a meet and greet with different faculty and staff and students, so they can have a better understanding of what people believe, how they see things, and so that just basically is ignorance towards different cultures.
Alright, so our group was lack of awareness, and the first thing that we kind of came up with was almost like a hot seat or hot topics event. And it'd be more of a laid back approach so that people wouldn't feel like they're being talked at. And so like, I don't know if you've seen Wendy Williams, but she has a hot seat, and basically you have someone on stage. We talked about
like the structure would be like we'd have a host and then like a guest chair, and we thought it'd be really cool to switch orgs every month. So Hopper would be 1 month, Connect would be 1 month, and they wouldn't be speaking on topics that just affect their community, but other communities. I thought that would be really, really cool to do.
But nationwide and worldwide, basically, like social media will promote like different news, but it's targeted towards certain individuals. So we'd just be talking about the hard facts, like giving everybody the hard facts and what's going on in the world, and then we'd have like 5 minutes on each topic talking about like, how do you feel about this? How does this affect your community, or what's your approach on this? So it kind of gets rid of saying, well, I wasn't aware, I didn't know about this topic. Right, we gave you the hard facts, you do what you will with it, but we're just having a laid back conversation. No one's like trying to steal information from the student.
I think it's very important that we have different orgs do it and host it every month, because different orgs are going to bring different crowds, and hopefully that brings in more inclusion.
So the break that we got was like no communication, and so we took that to no communication between like different clubs, and like with the DMI orgs as well as like between different social media marketers clubs. So we came up with like a workshop where we do like activities related like communication, but also like learning how to facilitate different conversations, because I feel like a lot of people coming in just don't have the background experience, and a lot of like the no communication comes from like not knowing how to, or like thinking you're doing it the right way when actuality there's a different way you should be going about it. And then also like doing that as a collab with DMI org, so that you know this is how you again like facilitate those conversations, and then also like keep it consistent.
Will you all have a applause? I think to come up with this in 10 minutes, you all have something great that you can take back to your organizations, possibly some collaborations that can happen here. And so the purpose of this activity is that when you look at this brick wall at first, it was really intimidating, right? But if we can all take a brick off of this wall, each organization on this campus, and we have over 100 organizations on this campus, that we can really assist with making sure that we have an inclusive campus. We're not gonna get everything every day, but if we keep working towards those different barriers and the ignorance and the things that we see here on this campus, that we can begin to be an inclusive campus. And so, sorry, we didn't do ours.
So we had, my exec board is not diversified, and at first we were like, oh, we should recruit, but then we're like, hold up, like someone could say, and our example is our office. A lot of people would say that myself, Ashley, and Taran are the same people, right?
Just because we're all black.
Just because we're all black. So think about that from in the perspective of someone saying like, well, that exec board is all white, or that exec board is all black, or that exec board is all Hispanic. It's more so from this perspective of how do you highlight their differences, even though you may think that they're the same. So a lot of people say, oh, we're all alike, but we have so many other identities, and how do we highlight those identities? So you will hear me more so talk about, because I'm a person with a disability, Like, that's my first identity that I want people to know about, right? And then if you knew about Duran, he likes to meditate. Like, he's really focused on like his meditation of like who he is as a person at the core. So you would know that he doesn't really do well with a lot of negative energy. So he vibes off of positivity.
And then for me, you would probably, if you know me, you probably know that my main focus is being a wife and being a mom. So I think just looking at us, you would say, oh, they're alike, but in conversations, you can see our different identities come up. And I think that's why we're a great team, because where some of our strengths lie at, the other person will be like, well, no, we got to think about this. And maybe the other one or two haven't considered that. And go ahead.
I was going to also say is, so when you see that your exec board is like, okay, from outward facing, that it looks like it's no diversity, it's more so how do you consciously make sure that you're having conversations on identities that are not seen or playing off of their strengths, right? And so that's another way for if I was a white student and everybody on my exec board was white, I would say, no, we have this, and this, and we want to make sure that we're trying to be more inclusive and bringing someone from a different perspective. And that's the same thing someone can say about Association of Black Collegians. They can say, well, everybody on there is black, so I don't think that's not really diversified. But Kayla can say, no, we have someone who's biracial, we have someone who comes from this background. She can speak to their strengths and their other identities, because your goal is to talk about the intersectionality, not necessarily, because closed-minded people will come with the fact that it's not diversified. But your idea is to start letting them know, like, it's more than that meets the eye, right? That's one thing you have to start having a conversation with your entire exec board. So do all of you know a lot about your exec board? That's something you should do. So do you know their background, their socioeconomic status, all of their majors, their family dynamics, something that's challenging for them? Do you know those things?
What are their strengths?
What are their strengths? What is an identity that they're still transitioning through, right? That's what if you're at a part, all of you on exec boards or have some form of leadership, that's your responsibility, is to know those things. You wouldn't say, hey, let's all go out to eat, and you know someone is working 3 jobs to pay for school. You would say, let me ask my advisor if we can pay for food so I can provide an opportunity because I know that. And I think that was brought up the other day when we did the C'est La Vie activity, is that you cannot always think that just because everyone is at Maryville that they got money, they're not dealing with any issue. Everyone has some type of something that they're dealing with, from like a family dynamic. You don't know all of those things. So when someone says like, oh, your mom and dad, I wasn't raised by my mom and dad. So you're assuming like certain cultural norms on someone. So those are just some things to think about when you're thinking about your exec boards. When someone says they're not diversified, it's just finding their strengths and finding other identities that are there, okay?
And then also me and Zoe, we talked about it a little bit more, that if you do find that your exec board is pretty much alike, or you're not finding that many commonalities, we talked about recruitment and how you could do that.
Yeah, I feel like that feeds back into programming. We talked about having inclusive programming and programming other social cultural orgs, and that's important because that just shows that you're like open to other identities, maybe outside of your own, and making sure that all identities are welcome within your space. So I think just making sure you have that dialogue going and that you have that, I don't know, just I guess that goal of like diversity and inclusion, and making sure people are aware that is something your org is conscious of.
And then you can always, if you see those individuals who really have an inclusive lens, how do you get them involved in your organization and mentor them up to be that next exec board? Okay. And so moving along, the purpose of this activity is that we don't want you to think that you leave here and you have to tackle all the barriers and challenges when it comes to building an inclusive campus. But what we want you to do is be intentional about your programming. When you see issues or concerns coming up on this campus, how can you take that and make it a programming effort and kind of close the gap of information or knowledge within that area? And then when we do that, it makes it easier for us to have an inclusive campus, so that as we continue to diversify as folks continue to show up as different identities, that we create a space where they feel inclusive and that we're moving closer to building an inclusive campus. Okay? Any questions, thoughts, concerns? All right, so we got a couple of examples for you.
So we were talking about advertising, right? How is your digital signage? How are they inclusive, right? So I found this flyer that I thought was really cool. You know, this talks about, you know, yes, it's like candy grams, but nowhere on there did it say giving it to like your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Didn't say anything about, and actually it just said a sweet surprise, right? And then it also talked about where, like, a different type of inclusive programming is that it wasn't just around like celebrating Valentine's Day. It said that all the funds are going to an organization to work to establish rights and entitlements of socially excluded groups in India, right? So how can we start taking what we think is like a basic program, and how can you make it even more inclusive? It's like, oh yeah, I'm selling candy grams, but I'm also targeted towards a cause, right? How is everyone across campus celebrating Heritage Months and not just relying on the cultural and social awareness student groups to do that, right? How could you collaborate with them? Or could you just say, our exec board is here to help with setup. We're gonna help we know this event is huge, we're here to help set up and clean up, so we know you have to run that event, right? So how do you see yourself being more of a support system when you know that there's a Heritage Month that's going to take up, I think you all have about like 8 or 9 events for Black History Month. And think about those events, that's them running those by themselves. So what could you do during Black History Month to support ABC? And maybe that's solely just saying, hey, we're gonna help you all so you all can not have to worry about that. How are you helping ABLE on Disability Awareness Week? How many of you are saying, you know what, we're sending 3 people from our exec board to support to see their panel? Or how are you helping? So just think of different ideas from not just, that's passive programming when you promote somebody else's program, but you also show up. And to show up and be present is completely different, right? You didn't just show up to eat food, you showed up to be an ally and to support them in the moment. Educating your exec boards on different religions and holidays. So maybe there's some events that you cannot host because you know, how can you have an event during a peak time if you really want Muslim students there or someone there, you know, from a different background? Do you know those things? And then just attending campus-wide, there's a lot of things that happen in from different schools that they have. So how can you partner with the faculty and staff with your organizations? They have the money, so you wouldn't even have to use MSG funding. They have money to put on those different cultural and social awareness events from their school, from an academic lens. So how are you reaching out of your comfort zone to really make our campus inclusive? And then lastly, we have our hashtag #InclusiveMU. We use it on everything. How can you help even build the brand around that? So if you're having events, yeah, we have Saints Nation. So #InclusiveMU on everything. So anybody will know, like, our campus is not just saying it, we're actually doing it. Okay?
So as we start to wrap up, a couple of resources we want to offer you when it comes to diversity and inclusion programming. You always have our staff, of course, but we also have our peer educators, which are part of the Multicultural Scholars Program. Their senior year, they develop workshops around areas in social justice. And so we had, I think, 6 great presentations this year that focused on cultural competency, immigration, cultural appropriation and appreciation, and many, many more. And this year we have some great presentations coming up as well. So how can you partner with these groups and Inclusive MU ambassadors? They get unconscious bias and intersectionality this year. And so there's opportunities for you to partner with your peers on campus and have them come to your student groups, your organizations, your floors, and get educated more on different topics around social justice. All you have to do is go to our website and go to the resources tab, and then you can fill in your information when you want them to come out, and we can confirm. But we also have office events. Some of our big ones are our MLK celebration that happens around every year. Around the table with IM, they do it, every month or so. They have a different organization that they partner with. You can attend various plays, festivals, and events in St. Louis that'll always happen as well. And so these are resources and ways that you continue to get educated. You can always read, you can always do your research as well. But you have plenty of resources right here on campus that you can utilize to educate your team, your organization, yourself, and your exec board a lot more. And so in closing, we want to encourage you all to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you're always comfortable, you're not learning. Even for myself, as a diversity and inclusion educator, there's still areas and ways that I can continue to learn. And there are some areas where I am not comfortable at, but I have to show up in those spaces so I can continue to educate myself and get more comfortable.
I would say we know we're in college, so we're in a space of always learning. So just continue to push yourself to like say, you know, I don't know. Even if you don't want to ask the question in a large group, feel comfortable, pull that person to the side and say, hey, where did you get that from, or what is that, or what does that mean? And then you will be able to share that knowledge. I think when I started learning more about a particular culture and how some culture, like I didn't know the word machismo, and I didn't know how that affected a lot of Latino women, and so I had to start reading. I was like, whoa, I need to read this. I need to read on this. Be aware. But then when I was able to, have more conversations with Latino men about it, because it's a form of also like toxic masculinity. So even from different cultural perspectives, I had to start pushing myself. And I didn't know those things until I started working with a different group of students. Continue to ask yourself, what do your organization need? What do they need to know? And what else can they push themselves outside of their comfort zone? What areas are you or others the expert in? And knowing that, as yesterday someone said, like your truth, your story. So how are you learning someone's story? And knowing that you all are the fabric of diversity and inclusion, and it's woven through the entire campus. Tomorrow is the big calendaring session, okay? Take a deep breath, don't worry about it, like events will happen. But ask yourself, are you collaborating with an organization or department that's completely different? And are you doing something new? And are you adding a different lens? And that's why those are some things I just want you to start thinking, like, we've done this for the past 5 years. Okay, we did it for 5 years, how are we gonna flip the script and make it completely different? And just remember why diversity and inclusion, what it means in developing programming. Is diversity and inclusion written in any of your constitutions? Do you have a position, or what's an intentional position on your exec boards around, you have a collaboration chair? I even think from the M-Store, like, Spencer, there's so many opportunities from just from an employment perspective, how you can make that space even more inclusive. So, and let your voice be heard, in any aspect. Are you asking your advisor, hey, instead of coming to an exec board meeting, can you lead us on a training? Or could we go instead of an exec board meeting, can we go try a different restaurant and have a conversation, like have hot topic conversations? Hey, this happened, let's talk about it. So, thank you all for coming to our session. We were here to help you all. I'm proud of you all for just even coming over some great events. I hope to see those. I'm really expecting to see those. But yeah, and if you all want to take a picture of this, this is your inclusive programming checklist, okay? So pass that on to anyone who's an RA, across your exec board, and run through those things to make sure that you meet those things. Yes, we would like those. We need those for the next. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.